What if I told you that the world's most recognized brand doesn't actually sell its product? Think about it. When was the last time you saw a Coca-Cola commercial that talked about the drink itself? The ingredients, the flavor profile, why it's better than the competition? You haven't, because Coca-Cola figured out something over a century ago that most companies are still struggling to understand today. They discovered that human beings don't make purchasing decisions based on logic or product quality. We make them based on emotion, identity, and association. And once you understand the 10 revolutionary marketing strategies that Coca-Cola pioneered, you'll never look at advertising the same way again. More importantly, you'll understand exactly how modern brands are manipulating your psychology right now, today, at this very moment. Let's start with the core principle that changed everything. In the 1880s, when Coca-Cola was first created, it was positioned as a medicine. The ads talked about relieving headaches and upset stomachs. And you know what happened? Nobody cared. Sales were pathetic. There were dozens of similar drinks making the same claims, and Coca-Cola was just noise in a crowded marketplace. But then something shifted. The company realized they were answering the wrong question. They'd been asking, "What does our product do?" when they should have been asking, "How does our product make people feel?" This wasn't just a subtle change in advertising copy. This was a complete philosophical revolution in how to build a brand. Instead of competing on features and benefits like every other company, Coca-Cola decided to compete on emotion and identity. Think about this for a second. When you picture Coca-Cola in your mind right now, what comes up? Is it the chemical formula? The taste profile? No. It's probably images of happiness, gatherings with friends, Santa Claus at Christmas, maybe summer barbecues or sporting events. That's not an accident. That's the result of over 100 years of relentless psychological conditioning. Coca-Cola doesn't sell a beverage. They sell the feeling you want to have. They sell the person you want to be. And once you understand this principle, you start seeing it everywhere in modern advertising. The second strategy Coca-Cola pioneered was something we now call omnipresence marketing. But back in the 1890s, it was revolutionary. The company's leadership had a simple philosophy: plaster the logo on everything, everywhere, all the time. They painted it on barns. They created branded billboards, banners, and placards that filled entire towns. If there was a surface that could display the Coca-Cola logo, they put it there. Now, you might think this sounds obvious. Every brand wants visibility, right? But here's what most people miss about why this strategy was so powerful. It wasn't just about awareness. It was about creating something psychologists call the mere exposure effect. This is a proven cognitive bias where people develop a preference for things simply because they're familiar with them. The more you see something, the more you trust it, even if you have no rational reason to. Coca-Cola understood this instinctively before the psychology was even formally studied. By ensuring their logo was everywhere people looked, they weren't just building brand recognition, they were building subconscious trust and preference. When you walked into a store and saw Coca-Cola on the shelf, it wasn't a foreign product. It was an old friend you'd been seeing around town for years. Today, this strategy has evolved into what marketers call surround sound marketing, or omni-channel presence. Whether it's social media, podcasts, streaming services, or physical retail, successful brands ensure they're present at every touchpoint in your life. Coca-Cola invented this playbook over a century ago, and modern companies are still following it religiously because it works on a fundamental psychological level that hasn't changed. Here's where Coca-Cola's marketing genius really started to show. In the early 1900s, they did something that seems normal now, but was completely unprecedented at the time. They got lists of pharmacy customers and mailed out free coupons for Coca-Cola. Free trials, free samples, introductory offers. This is standard practice now, but Coca-Cola pioneered this strategy, and they did it for a reason that goes much deeper than just getting people to try the product. The psychology behind this is fascinating. There are two principles at work here. First, there's reciprocity. When someone gives you something for free, you feel psychologically obligated to give something back. Even if it's just a free drink coupon, receiving it creates a subtle sense of debt. When you use that coupon, you're not just trying a product, you're completing a social transaction. And second, there's the concept of invested interest. Once you've tried something, especially something you had to make an effort to acquire, even if it was free, you've invested in it. You've spent time, you've made a choice, and human psychology hates waste. So you're more likely to rationalize that it was worth it and continue purchasing. But Coca-Cola took this even further. They didn't just want one-time trials. The drink contained caffeine and originally even cocaine, both highly addictive substances. So those free samples weren't just marketing, they were creating chemical dependency. Give someone enough free samples of an addictive product, and you don't need to convince them to buy. Their own neurochemistry does the convincing for you. Now, I'm not saying this was necessarily the conscious strategy, but the effect was undeniable. People came back for more. Let's talk about celebrity endorsements. Because Coca-Cola didn't just use them, they weaponized them in ways that transformed advertising forever. In the early 20th century, Coca-Cola started paying movie stars and athletes to be photographed with their product. This might sound unremarkable now, because every brand does it. But back then, this was groundbreaking. And the psychology behind why it works is more sophisticated than most people realize. When you see a celebrity or athlete you admire holding a Coca-Cola, your brain doesn't process this as an advertisement. It processes it as social proof. You're seeing someone successful, someone you look up to, someone who has achieved what you want to achieve, and they're consuming this product. Your subconscious makes an immediate connection. If I consume what they consume, maybe I can be more like them. This is called aspirational marketing, and it bypasses rational thought entirely. But Coca-Cola took this even further with their use of what they called Coca-Cola girls. Attractive women prominently featured in advertisements, always with a Coke in hand. This was exploiting another psychological principle, the halo effect. When something beautiful or attractive is associated with a product, our brains transfer those positive attributes to the product itself. We're not just seeing an attractive person, we're subconsciously learning to associate Coca-Cola with beauty, desirability, and social success. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Coca-Cola also heavily featured Santa Claus in their Christmas advertising, always holding a bottle of Coke. Think about the genius of this for a moment. They're associating their brand with one of the most beloved figures in children's minds during the most emotionally significant holiday of the year. They're creating neural pathways in developing brains that connect Coca-Cola with joy, magic, generosity, and family. That's not marketing. That's psychological programming that lasts a lifetime. Now we're going to talk about something that blows my mind, because most people think data-driven marketing is a modern invention. It's not. Coca-Cola created an entire statistical department in the early 20th century to analyze car traffic patterns and movement in supermarkets. They studied where people walked, where their eyes naturally fell, how they moved through retail spaces, and they used this data to determine the most effective locations for their advertisements and product placement. This is remarkable because they were doing in the physical world what companies like Facebook and Google do digitally today. They were tracking behavior, identifying patterns, and optimizing for maximum exposure and conversion. The medium was different, but the strategy was identical. Use data to understand human behavior, then position your product in the path of that behavior. What's even more impressive is how quickly Coca-Cola adapted to new mediums as technology evolved. When radio became popular, they were early advertisers on radio. When television emerged, they immediately invested heavily in TV commercials. When the internet arrived, they built robust digital campaigns. This willingness to embrace new platforms and experiment with new technologies has been a constant throughout Coca-Cola's history. The lesson here isn't just about being early to new platforms. It's about understanding that consumer attention is the most valuable resource in marketing, and wherever that attention goes, you need to follow. Coca-Cola understood this before anyone else, and they've maintained that understanding for over a century. They don't wait for proof that a new medium works. They experiment, they test, they learn, and they dominate before their competitors even understand what's happening. Let's discuss one of the most powerful but least understood aspects of Coca-Cola's marketing success: their strategic association with significant cultural and emotional moments. The best example of this is their relationship with World War II. During the war, Coca-Cola made a public promise that every soldier would be able to get a Coke for 5 cents wherever they were in the world, no matter what it cost the company. On the surface, this seems like a patriotic gesture, maybe even a financial sacrifice. But look deeper and you see pure marketing brilliance. They were associating Coca-Cola with one of the most emotionally intense periods in American history. Soldiers in the middle of war, separated from home, experiencing trauma and fear. They got a taste of home through Coca-Cola. That's not just brand loyalty, that's emotional anchoring at the deepest possible level. When those soldiers came home, they didn't just remember Coca-Cola as a drink. They remembered it as a symbol of hope during their darkest hours. They remembered it as a piece of America when they were far from home. And they became the most effective sales force the company could ever have, telling their families and friends about how much that Coke meant to them during the war. The emotional connection was so deep that it transcended normal consumer behavior. But there's another layer to this strategy that's even more impressive. By positioning their product in global conflict zones, Coca-Cola achieved rapid international expansion. They set up bottling plants all over the world, often with government funding, all under the guise of supporting the war effort. When the war ended, those plants remained, and suddenly Coca-Cola had a global distribution network that would have taken decades to build otherwise. They turned patriotism into profit and global dominance into nationalism. It's almost too perfect to be accidental. Now we need to talk about one of Coca-Cola's most controversial but effective strategies: targeting children. The company understood something fundamental about consumer behavior. If you can create brand loyalty in childhood, you have a customer for life. They called this their cradle-to-grave strategy, and they pursued it aggressively through multiple channels. They created exclusive contracts with schools where Coca-Cola products would be the only beverages sold in vending machines. They produced toys, board games, Barbie dolls, and collectibles that they claimed were for adults but were obviously designed to appeal to children. They integrated product placement into family films and children's programming. All of this was designed to bypass restrictions on advertising directly to children, while still ensuring that kids were exposed to Coca-Cola branding constantly. The psychology here is about habit formation and neural pathway development. When children consume something regularly during their developmental years, it becomes part of their identity. It's not just a preference, it becomes associated with comfort, nostalgia, and their sense of self. Research shows that brand preferences formed in childhood are incredibly resistant to change, even when presented with contradictory information later in life. Coca-Cola understood this intuitively and built their entire long-term strategy around it. This is why, even today, even knowing everything we know about sugar consumption and health effects, people still reach for Coca-Cola. It's not a rational choice, it's an emotional one, rooted in decades of conditioning that started when they were too young to critically evaluate marketing messages. Here's where Coca-Cola's marketing strategy gets into more ethically questionable territory. But it's important to understand because this tactic is still used extensively today. When scientific research started showing clear connections between sugary soft drinks and obesity, diabetes, and other health problems, Coca-Cola didn't change their product or marketing. Instead, they funded their own research. They poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into studies specifically designed to cast doubt on the link between soda consumption and negative health outcomes. And surprise, surprise, the studies they funded generally concluded that Coca-Cola wasn't causing significant problems. But here's the really manipulative part. They didn't prominently disclose who funded these studies, so the research appeared independent when it was actually designed to support a predetermined conclusion. This is a strategy taken straight from the tobacco industry playbook. You can't win a debate against overwhelming scientific consensus, so you don't try to. Instead, you create confusion and doubt. You fund enough contrary research that the average person thinks the issue is still up for debate. You manufacture uncertainty where none actually exists in the scientific community. And it works, because most people don't have the time or expertise to evaluate scientific research themselves. They just hear that experts disagree, and they assume the truth must be somewhere in the middle. This strategy allowed Coca-Cola to continue selling and marketing their product aggressively to children, even as evidence mounted about the health consequences. They weren't fighting the science directly. They were fighting the public perception of the science. And in many ways, they won. Let's talk about what appeared to be Coca-Cola's biggest marketing failure, but ended up proving their greatest success: New Coke. In the 1980s, Coca-Cola changed their formula. They'd done extensive testing showing people preferred the new taste. But when they launched it, the public went absolutely ballistic. Thousands of angry calls and letters poured in every single day. People acted like Coca-Cola had betrayed them personally. The outrage was unprecedented. Now, here's the fascinating part. When Coca-Cola brought back the original formula as Coca-Cola Classic, all that anger instantly transformed into euphoria and celebration. Sales skyrocketed. People who hadn't thought about Coca-Cola in years suddenly realized how much it meant to them. The whole disaster became the most effective marketing campaign the company could have ever designed. Some people believe this was intentional, a staged controversy to manufacture emotional attachment. But the truth is even more interesting. It was a genuine mistake that accidentally proved Coca-Cola's marketing philosophy was correct all along. You see, blind taste tests consistently showed that people preferred new Coke over both original Coke and Pepsi. Based purely on taste, the original formula should have lost, but people overwhelmingly chose original Coke anyway. That's when everyone realized Coca-Cola's success was never about the product. It was about the emotional connection people had to the brand. The image they'd created in people's minds was so powerful that it overrode taste, logic, and personal preference. People were literally choosing to drink something they liked less because of how the brand made them feel. That's not marketing, that's magic. Asterisk. So here's what you need to understand. Every strategy we've discussed, Coca-Cola invented or perfected, and every major brand today is using these exact same techniques on you right now. The omnipresence, the emotional anchoring, the celebrity endorsements, the childhood targeting, the manufactured research, the aspirational messaging. It's all still happening. The only difference is the medium has changed and the sophistication has increased. Coca-Cola proved that if you can control how people feel about your brand, the actual product almost doesn't matter. You're not selling a thing. You're selling an identity, a feeling, a memory, a version of yourself that people want to become. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing it everywhere. In every commercial, every sponsored post, every influencer partnership, every brand collaboration. They're all following the Coca-Cola playbook, whether they realize it or not. The question is, now that you know how it works, will you fall for it anyway?